Hello everyone, welcome back to alkyne hydroxide 784. So today we will be looking at another arts question commonly covered in GP essays. And this question is, what is the value of art? So for answering this question, we will first look at what we mean by value because we already defined art in episode 9. So just watch that if you need a definition of an art. But we'll look at what we mean by value and then we'll look at what are the different aspects where art can be considered valuable or not valuable. So yeah, first the definition of value, and we will look at a dictionary for this. To be honest, the fourth definition onwards doesn't really work here, so let's just look at the, like, if we just cut it to the first three. The first one says it's like the monetary worth of something, which is kind of like the market price or something. The second one says it's a fair return or equivalent in goods, services, or money for something exchanged. And the third one says a relative worth, utility, or importance. I think the third one is the most encompassing because you can put it in any terms. It can be money, it can be like a word in a different way as well. So let's go with that one. So basically, the meaning of value is its worth or usefulness or importance in a sense. So now let us look at the different aspects of value and see where art falls into these. I'll just go through them one by one and we'll see how that goes. The first one is the cultural value. So the cultural value is like the most obvious value of art because art, at least for living beings like humans and animals, it's a form of culture and community. In fact, it may have been one of the earliest forms of culture, especially in the visual form. Think of ground up pigments that they've used for cave drawings, tattoos, and yes, many people still tattoo using pigments and traditional indigenous methods to tattoo. And it's a cultural norm, and they usually do it like as part of their ritual. So if you want to know more, you can search up on that, and also for other coloring purposes. So why is art valuable in a cultural sense? Well, because the two are inexorably linked. Even in our cultural practices that seem to not involve actual artwork, there is an art to the whole thing. Like there's like a step by step process of what you do, and also the dresses that you wear, which obviously should be art. The planning of how you set up everything, or even the decoration, that'll be art. And the details of what order you need to do each thing. If you mess it up, then it doesn't, like, the ritual doesn't actually succeed. And that's also an art. So yeah, and there's also social interactions. If you consider that an art, then okay, cool. But you get the point. Culture is a form of expression of identity, and so is art. So in a way, art literally is the life force of culture. It keeps it fresh and constantly evolving to prevent being brushed off. So what I mean by this statement is that, well, art is something where you can always get something new out of it. So people keep paying attention to it, and it allows culture to continue, being a thing and not just being ignored by people. Yeah. So art is indeed full of cultural value. So do we feel proud of our local artists? Well, I guess not in Singapore. Or at least MediaCorp doesn't give us enough quality here. Of course, we do hope to see more quality in local arts, and we do know that there are definitely quite a few very talented local artists here. It's just that we don't get to see them in like a very big stage. There's not that many opportunities for them to shine. And since Singapore doesn't seem that inspiring, as I've just said, like, honestly, the level of motivation that we give, or the level of opportunity that we give, isn't very much. And in fact, there's a lot of restrictions, and that's why, yeah, it's hard for the artists here to actually do things that truly, that's true to their passion. But anyways, if Singapore isn't inspiring enough, well, here's an example that I encounter while listening to music. So I guess you don't really need to know my taste in music, but when I'm listening to songs, usually in the comment section, there'll be people who are praising the language and the composers. In a way, it is harking back to identity. And okay, so for reference, I listen to Tamil songs, and in a way, it has been told many a time that Tamil is a pretty beautiful language in a way, and it's also like a very old language, been there for many, many years. And that's why people in the comment sections of all these songs will start like, praising the language, they'll be praising the composers, because honestly, the music is really good. So yeah, it's quite um interesting. It shows that they're like showcasing the identity in a sense. And yeah, like I wrote a sentence that even I feel somewhat inclined to justify why I don't bother listening to English songs. Actually, the reason is much more mundane, which is that I am not that exposed to English songs, so I don't, actively pursue them. I just like to listen to songs that I've already listened to a whole bunch of times. That's my style of doing things. I'm not much of a. I like music, but I don't actively search for new songs to listen to. Yeah. So, are there instances where art does not hold cultural value? Well, that's hard to say. It may be possible that art can have negative value, but in the terms of culture, there's never zero value. What do I mean? So, yeah, let's say if there's actual cultural appropriation and it wasn't done properly. I, and I'm not referring to what Americans consider bad cultural appropriation. I mean it in a very, very serious sense, like people who don't respect the other culture while incorporating it into art. So, for example, if you've seen one of those, there was this like real estate ad that was featured in a Sneaky Sushi video, and if you watch the ad itself, well, that's messed up. But I think you should watch the reaction. It's quite fun. But in that scenario, the people who were giving the real estate ad kind of ended up disrespecting a whole bunch of people, and they didn't even try properly to do what they were intending to do properly. And yeah, that's kind of sad. But does that mean that there is no cultural value? Well, rather we could say that there's a negative value, because when you disrespect the culture, you either decrease the value of that culture or you decrease the value of your own culture in the eyes of the viewer. So for in that sense, we are saying that culture cannot really have zero value art cannot really have zero cultural value. It's either a positive or negative. So for more like proper discussions of the value of art and in extension culture, you can look at the Guardian article. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing, which is societal value. Wait a minute, isn't this the same thing? What is the difference between cultural and societal value? Well, let's put this simply. We all like our Singapore icons, but we don't want our kids to become artists. That's the difference. Well, still don't get it? Well, cultural value is embedded and it is a given. Everyone feels about their culture. And in this sense, I'm actually referring to Singaporean culture to some degree. And that's why we like our Singapore icons, at least the artists that we can actually see in the stage and who are actually visible. And we like them to some extent, at least the better ones. However, societal value is very different, and it is not based on whether it is valuable to culture, but whether it allows one to be recognized in terms of societal values. So, for example, here in Singapore, we tell our kids to do STEM subjects because, science is seen as more valuable in Singaporean society. Even if you learn piano or dance, because a lot of people do that, like here in Singapore, we are quite kiasu, we learn everything. It is actually more for being kiasu rather than, you know, for actual pursuing of an arts career. And sometimes they may do it just to help you study better, because there's been studies that say having studying music or something helps you be better at schoolwork as well. So yeah, and the end goal is just study and do well in school. That is what the Singaporean mindset generally is. And with all of the restrictions to doing art and the insufficient funding from NAC, it's subjective, but yeah, to some extent is pretty true. It doesn't seem very easy to get much out of doing art in Singapore. I mean, there is a reason why parents don't really want their kids to be doing an arts job from this sense, from this point of view. Although the other reason would be just a general ingrained stereotype that arts jobs just don't pay well. And yeah, there's not much to get out of it, be it money wise or pursuing your actual dreams wise as well. Yeah, like that's an argument that I can provide why it may not be that worthwhile to have an art job in Singapore, because it's not just about the money, it's also the fact that there's a lot of restrictions to what you can actually do in terms of of your artwork, especially if your interest is, maybe politically based or something that goes against the norm in Singapore. And yeah, that's just how it works. So if you compare this to the other countries in the world, well, in bigger countries there are many private sponsors, and it's much easier to pursue and sustain an art career in the eyes of the society in other countries, because in many places there are a lot of avenues to create, to introduce alternative viewpoints and to introduce novel art in the sense. And art can have social value if it's seen as valuable in the eyes of the society. So that's what it means to have social value, which is different from cultural value. And the other way that we can say it has value in societal terms, if it reflects societal truths, which we will be talking about more in the political value part of it. But the idea is, if the art helps to bring to light some sort of societal problem or some sort of societal truth, it does bring some value to society and help society become better. But if it doesn't do either of those things, if it's just purely for aesthetic pleasure, and if it's not something that will get you far in society, then it would be considered to not have much societal value. Okay, so the next one is monetary value. Well, okay, this is the simplest one to explain, because monetary value is it's so easy to understand. It comes about when people give value to art. That is the literal meaning of how things end up having a monetary value, because people need it for something or they want it for something, so they pay money for it. And for this, just look through towards the many art galleries and auctions selling artworks for money that we can't or won't pay in our lives. And it's not just paintings, movies, dramas, songs, you name it. They follow a big business. Like each movie pays many, many people and also earns many, many money, like moolah. It earns a lot of money. There's so much money that's made from the cinema industry. And you can literally just search for the most profitable movies and just use one of them for your example. It's so easy to do that. Although you probably have to remember the number, I guess. But you can just prove very easily just how much monetary value happens to be hidden in these things. And sometimes if a play or a concert is something unique to the country that's occurring, so like for example, many of the plays, they don't go everywhere in the world. They only choose a select bunch of locations, especially the ones that can actually afford to go watch the movie, like the people are rich enough. So for the people in the other parts of the country or in other countries altogether, well, they have to go there in order to watch the concert. So in other words, it's not really just the concert or the play that will get the money. It's also the surrounding businesses like the restaurants and the hotels, because people who need to come there in order to watch will need a place to stay in and also to eat in the restaurants, I guess. So these places will get secondary money influx through this, through the fact that plays or concerts happen. And actually, even if you don't talk about it in the big sense of things, art itself can be a business in terms of the supplies that you require, like the paint. If you're doing painting, you need a paint form like either acrylic or oil or poster, or I don't care about the other ones. So I mean watercolor, I guess. Watercolor, tempera. Okay, that's as many different kinds of paints I can remember. Glass paint. Yeah, glass paint, fabric paint. Okay, never mind. The point is there's all kinds of paints and there's all kinds of materials that you can paint on. For example, the canvas, the like just plain old paper, or you can have like a wooden panel, or like a canvas can also have a canvas sheet or a canvas panel or a canvas with the wooden what's that, the frame thing at the back. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of aspects to it. And if you want to, dilute your paint, there's paint thinner. If you want to paint the thing on the canvas, you need paint brushes or other tools like that what's that thing, the thing that looks like a scraper thing. It's like this flat palette knife. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. It's a palette knife. And of course, you need an actual palette to hold on the paint. And yeah, that's a lot of stuff, and that's why art can cost quite a bit of money to pursue in a sense. And it's not just for painting; it's also for like music. If you are playing an instrument, you need to buy the instrument, and you need to maybe buy certain things to help maintain the instrument over a long period of use. Or if I mean, like if you're singing, I don't think there'll be that many things to buy, but maybe you might need certain things to help you sing. I'm not sure. But for the most part, singing is probably not so expensive. And dancing, I guess the act of dancing itself is pretty free, but if you want to perform, then you need like costumes, need some and you need a location to dance sometimes, which would cost money. And I could just keep going on. Like all kinds of art kind of require some money to, help it be a thing. And that is a business in itself. So there is monetary value to art. Okay, so monetary value aside, what's the next one? Well, it's political value. Oh, yeah, this sounds really interesting because politics. So does art have political value? Yes, indeed. Any history student will say yes to that question. I mean, if you've studied history before, you'd have definitely encountered at least one propaganda art. And it's not just the one panel style, like the comic style, like just one panel of political commentary that you consider as art. There's also like stuff like movies and songs and stuff. And actually, like one of the things that's quite interesting, that during the Cold War, both the USSR and USA actually did stuff that was propaganda-ish. The USSR was a bit more explicit with its propaganda movies. It was just super obvious, like, oh, okay, the USA is your enemy or something like that. Or not really USA specifically, but like capitalism is your enemy. I don't know how they show it, but they have stuff for that. And even if you look at USA, like American cinema, which is, doesn't seem like there'll be that much propaganda, but there definitely was, because even in the superhero movies, like, the Marvel kind of superheroes, in those old days, like, there were very subtle aspects of propaganda in terms of of who is the hero and who is the villain. So like it would be kind of portraying the socialists or like the communist people as the villain, even though they won't explicitly say communist. They'll just show some people who seem to refer to the USSR in some way or the other. So yeah, if you want to know more about that, I suppose you can search it up, or if I find something, I'll put it there. So, and apart from propaganda, there is social commentary, which I mentioned earlier, and like that's kind of more acceptable and more relevant nowadays, because different newspapers do feature their own social commentary. And even in the Straits Times, even though it's a little bit more mild and not too extreme politically, there is still some sort of social commentary in that one panel comic thing that at the back of the home paper in Straits Times. So these things actually showcase. Okay, sometimes they showcase political views, or sometimes they just like showcase certain opinions on certain social issues or political issues. And in countries where these like explicitly political view kind of stuff is accepted, well, they can actually jab fun at politicians and jab fun at their supposedly dumb or ineffective policies. So does all art have a political value? No, not really. Most works of art aren't exactly done with a political goal in mind. It's only a few of them that have a political goal. And in a way, they do not hold much political value unless they have a political goal in mind, if any. And actually, now I remember the one that I was talking about in the previous episode for arts, which was the drama. Sorry, the little skit about the guy who was hitting 13 pieces of tofu. I forgot what's the name of that one, but that is also technically a political piece in a way because it references the section 377A. So yeah, that there is political value in that piece of art, but not all of the art forms or not all of the artworks that are there today have political value. It's only a select few, or if they're done with that intention, then you get that political value. Yeah, so these are the four forms of value that we have looked at today. I can't really think of any others. Hold up right there. Actually, I do have two others that I thought of just today, and the two of them are, you know, medical value and scientific value. So I'm just gonna go through them very quickly. I'm sorry, the video is already like 20 minutes long and I'm making it even longer. Okay, never mind. Okay, so the first one is medical value, and that is basically through the form of art therapy. So, when you have a mental illness or if you're just feeling down, art can really help you to feel better about yourself. And there are actually legit art therapy sessions that exist in hospitals to help people feel better about themselves, express their emotions in the form of an artwork, be it drawing or maybe even through songs and other forms of art. So, art does have a medical value as well if you think about it that way. Um, of course, not all art forms would have a medical value per se, just because the art that tends to have medical value is the kind that you usually do yourself, or like when you're supposed to, just freely draw something or just freely express instead of following a certain constraint or anything of that sort. Of course, art can also have a medical value in the sense that if you listen to a certain music, you feel better, or if you look at something, you feel better. Like it's a bit like a catharsis, although I guess that's a bit different. Like catharsis is a bit different, but something similar to that. Like you look at something and you feel better about it, or you feel better about your own condition or your own state of being. Then yeah, it could have a medical purpose as well. So art does have a medical value. And the other thing that has is a scientific value, which is that which is a bit easier to say compared to just medical value. So I suppose you can put that under scientific value. So art does have a scientific value because art and science are inexorably linked. And if you want, I can even do a whole episode about that. But the thing is, science depends on art and art depends on science. I feel like they coexist together and you cannot really separate the two of them. In fact, there are even theories that, if you talk about mathematics, which is the most abstract of all sciences, I think, if you do not agree with me, then okay, that's not the big thing here. The thing is that there's actually a theory that maths or scientific theories that look beautiful are the best ones to use. I mean, in general, like if you have a theory that looks very ugly, like if your equation looks a little bit too ugly, then it does not perfectly describe everything. I think this is actually a physics based on physics, not maths, sorry. But yeah, it's the same kind of logic here. So if your theory seems to nicely, factor for everything, or like just looking at a nice concise equation. By concise, I don't mean F equals to MA levels of concise, but something that doesn't look like a huge mess and you can't even understand what's going on. But it can be something that you can understand once you know what all the terms are and you get it pretty easily. Like maybe at most like a fraction or something like that. So that's the idea. And there's a video all about it. You can watch it if you want. And apart from stuff like that, it is also helpful because nature provides certain forms of an art, in the sense that if you consider the way that nature grows an art, that is also useful for science, because a lot of scientific things rely on how nature does a similar thing to replicate the same thing artificially. And there's many examples of that, and maybe that would be worth talking about in an episode, like how nature influences science. And I mean, just two examples, like the flight that we have created is inspired by birds to some extent. And today I was watching a video about solar panels, and the solar panel designs that have the most efficiency would follow that of leaves, because they do kind of the similar thing. Like plants use sunlight to make energy, solar panels also use sunlight to make energy, of course slightly different ways, but the similar purpose. And yeah, so these show that you can actually use art to influence science and vice versa. So like art influencing science directly in terms of human art per se. Yeah, we can use art to deduce the history of when humans were there, or like you can use science to deduce, like, I mean, if you use the carbon dating and all those things, you can actually figure out how old certain things happen and all those things. So art does help in a way. Like, it kind of helps in a historical sense as well. You can help use art to help this figure out what are the different eras of time and to categorize everything. So I guess that would be historical value. So yeah, there's actually more kinds of value that you can get from art than we earlier predicted. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think another example of art with scientific value is, I think there's one, what's that painting called? The Starry Night. So the painting actually depicts fluid dynamics if you look at it in a certain way. If you look at the swirls in the Starry Night, they kind of represent, like, they kind of look very similar to the turbulent flow of water, of liquids in general, of fluids. And that is pretty cool, right? And like, yeah. So, and sometimes maybe you can use art to determine how an artist's life was affected, because their art had certain chemicals in it, or certain you know certain, actually just chemicals. Usually sometimes if they use certain toxic chemicals, they may die from it, or they may get certain poisoning from the chemicals that they've used in the artworks. So yeah, there is a lot of different kinds of value to art, and it's not just as simple as cultural value or monetary value. And art, like, I did continue the earlier recording with something else, so I'm just gonna continue with it now so that I don't have to cut it, like, place this in between and cut it and do all that stuff. So the other two things that I was going to mention at the end after saying the four stuff, right, because I didn't really have a full explanation for those two, was on spiritual and religious value. So spiritual and religious is kind of, can be a subset of cultural value, because generally religion and culture are quite linked together in many ways. And you can just use like examples of the religious structures, like the architectural artwork. And if you look at your temples, your churches, mosques, or any religious location, there's definitely very distinct artwork in each of them, or distinct patterns or designs that you can see in each of these um, buildings. And I mean, places of worship, if you say that. And the designs in these places kind of represent the culture in a way, like, or represent the religion in a way, because um, yeah, in certain cases, the religion and culture of a community is very closely interlinked, and the artwork in the places of worship does demonstrate that culture. So there is definitely religious value to artwork as well. And apart from like places of worship, there's also pictures of deities, like gods and other higher beings, if you'd like to say that. So some cultures some religions like to depict their gods and some religions do not. I think you know which is which. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just one of the aspects of their cultural part of religion. One religion prefers to show their gods in portraits and statues and stuff like that, and another religion doesn't want to show it. They feel like that is disrespectful to their higher to their god or their higher being in a sense. So yeah, so art does have a different aspect of cultural value in the sense of religion as well. So sorry for adding another 10 minutes to the video, but I think all of these tangents would help you to craft a more varied, more broad essay, and hope that you can use this to your own advantage if you're talking about art in various forms. And if you have your own argument that I still haven't thought of, even after the hindsight of a day, then feel free to write it. If you know how to argue it through, you can do it. No issue. Just search up online, find some examples, and just prepare yourself beforehand. So I hope you found this video useful because I think this was actually a pretty interesting topic and one that could very much be tested in a GP essay. And or even if it's not tested in that sense, that kind of question, it could be tested as a different kind of question, like I don't know, something that requires you to mention the value of art. Maybe the benefits versus the cons of art in the sense. So yeah, I hope that's kind of helpful in a way. And yeah, if you found this video useful, please press the like button and subscribe. And with that, I would like to say thank you and bye.